I would like to call the March 10th Planning Commission meeting to order. Would you like to take the roll, please?
Commissioner Mills.
Present.
Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Dredski.
Present.
Commissioner McCombs.
Present.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
I'm sorry, did you say?
Commissioner Martin is, or I mean, Commissioner Ryan is still trying to get logged in, but he has not been successful yet.
Thank you. Please stand and join me with a pledge to the flag. And again, we have multiple flags to pick from. I guess we'll face forward. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda are the two sets of minutes that were presented to us, this, December 10th and February 11th. They've been submitted for approval. Any comments or questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
on the 12/10/2025, there's a couple of little typos, and I'm just asking that the one motion Mr. McCombs made, I believe he read that motion from the staff recommendation, and if that could be put in instead of what is there right now. What is there right now says recommended the Planning Commission to move the City Council for the Port of Anacortes West Basin redevelopment, etc. And it's not, doesn't quite make sense, but it would make sense if it was just put in the way that he read it.
Okay.
And Commissioner Ryan has joined us.
Good evening.
Evening.
We are discussing the minutes. We're in the agenda regarding the minutes from December and February. Would you like to make a motion with those corrections?
I'd like to move to approve the minutes of December 10th, 2025 with the few typos and with the revision of the wording for Mr. McCombs' motion.
And do we have a second?
I second that motion.
And second by Mr. McCombs. Standard to just call for a vote at this point? Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we need to call out individually, or can we just, all in favor say aye?
Aye.
All opposed by the same sign? Motion passes.
I'm a nay.
I'm sorry?
I'm a nay on that motion, as I was not present at the meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, it would be a nay or an abstain?
Abstain, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Correct myself.
I'll
All right.
abstain.
And I'm sorry, what did you say, Mr. Ryan?
No, I'll abstain. I wasn't at the meeting either.
Okay. And then we'll move on to the February meeting. Any comments regarding that one?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Mills.
in the February minutes, just two very minor corrections on the first item, election of officers. We've got some words reversed. It says that Linda Martin advised that there will be 2 elected officials for today's meeting. I think we need to reverse the words officials and elected. We are electing 2 officials, not.
Okay. Point number 1.
Point number 2 is close to the end during the planning department update. It was stated that I had a question about the impact of fees on ADUs, and the word "of" is extraneous to my statement. It's just impact fees.
Okay. I also noted that in a roll call, Paul Ryan was present. Then right below that, it says he was absent. So this is regarding the February 11th meeting. Maybe Mr. Ryan could enlighten me whether he was in attendance or not in attendance on February 11th.
You know, that's a good question. I don't have my calendar open.
We can check the video.
Yeah, please do that. Thank you, guys.
All right, any other corrections to be noted? Do we have a motion to accept those with the corrections?
So moved.
And do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second, so we'll vote the same way we did the previous set of minutes. All in favor of accepting these with the correction, say aye.
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 All opposed by the same sign. All right, motion passes. All right, do we have any public comment tonight? Please stand up and state your name. Evidently, nobody here tonight to do that. Do we have anybody online?
There are no hands raised.
I'm sorry?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, so public comment's going to be very, very limited. Public hearings. Other business. I guess we're down to Shoreline Master Program Overview and Periodic Update Reintroduction. Good evening.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Hello, Commissioner Ryan. So I've got a PowerPoint presentation here. Okay, so I am here this evening to talk, to give the Planning Commission I'm not going to say brief, because it's a little bit longer than brief, but to kind of refresh your memories about what the Anacortes Shoreline Master Program is, and I'm going to just walk through, well, here, I'll show you. I'm going to walk through the basics of the Shoreline Management Act, which is the reason that we have a Shoreline Master Program. I'm going to walk through the Anacortes the currently adopted Anacortes Shoreline Master Program and talk about the different chapters within that and key policies and regulations. And then we'll try something and go through kind of a example review process where we'll take a look at a potential project in shoreline jurisdiction and kind of walk through the steps of what, as a planner, what we're looking for in an application. And I'm hoping it will also help potentially members of the public or property owners that have shoreline properties to kind of become more familiar with what they might look up to know more about what they can do with their property and what some of the allowances and restrictions might be. And then finally, we'll move into the periodic update of the Shoreline Master Program requirements under the Shoreline Management Act and talk a little bit about the status of the periodic update that was initiated in 2019. All right, so just to kick it off, why are shorelines important? I think we all, living in Anacortes, we all have an understanding for the value that they can bring to our lives, improving our quality of life, supporting economic vitality for the community, waterfront, industrial, marine industries, tourism, and recreation. Waterfront supports all of those. There are a lot of recreational opportunities that come from having shorelines, including, boating, all of these trails, parks. We love our shorelines. So there are a lot of reasons to want to preserve and protect and plan for them in a way to ensure that they are sustainable and healthy for generations. So the Shoreline Management Act is the state law that was enacted in 1971, adopted by the legislature, and then ratified by the voters in 1972. And it had the overarching goal of preventing the inherent harm in an uncoordinated and piecemeal development of the state's shoreline. So there was a lot of concern at the time, in the years prior, that, projects were happening on shorelines. There was no plan. There were environmental impacts resulting, and the public's use of the waterways was being impacted. And so the Shoreline Management Act arose out of that situation and established a statewide framework for managing, accessing, and protecting the shorelines in Washington. The SMA sets up a partnership between the Washington state and local governments. It requires local jurisdictions to develop shoreline master programs that work to implement the SMA's policies, and the Department of Ecology at the state level provides technical assistance to local governments and ensures compliance with the Shoreline Management Act. There are three broad policies of the Shoreline Management Act, and those are to protect the environmental resources of the state shorelines and promoting public access and enjoyment opportunities, and also giving priority to uses that require a shoreline location. So that means that uses that rely on water access, the SMA gives those preferred status over uses that don't necessarily have to be located along the water in order for them to function. So the Anacortes Shoreline Master Program is a comprehensive land use plan for the shoreline area. And as I mentioned, it's intended to carry out the policies of the Shoreline Management Act in a way that is consistent with the Anacortes Comprehensive Plan and local existing actual conditions on the ground that are local to, specific to Anacortes. The SMP is both a planning and a regulatory document, so it has goals and policies for the use, development, protection, and restoration of shorelines, and then it also has development regulations that apply to development activities in the shorelines that are intended to implement the goals and policies. And it also sets up an administrative process that includes the shoreline permit systems and enforcement that the city uses to review development applications for conformance with the SMP. Because this is a longer presentation, please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. Thanks. Okay, so the Shoreline Management Act applies within shoreline jurisdiction. And so shoreline, oh, this is my one slide with animation. So shoreline jurisdiction includes all marine waters, streams and rivers with greater than 20 cubic feet per second mean annual flow. And there are none of those in Anacortes, so we don't have to worry about that. Lakes, 20 acres or larger, which we do have a couple. And upland areas that extend 200 feet landward from the ordinary high water mark of the marine shorelines and lakes, and also associated wetlands. Just a little background on the history of the Shoreline Master Program in Anacortes. As I mentioned, the SMA was adopted in 1972, and Anacortes adopted its first Shoreline Master Program in 1977. So it's been around for quite a while. over time, there have been various amendments. Some were smaller, some were larger. In 2001, there was a pretty significant rewrite to implement the Fidalgo Bay Plan. And then in 2010, there was a very significant rewrite, pretty much, of the Shoreline Master Program. So that was the last periodic update that the city did on its Shoreline Master Program. And for that update process, it was significant because the Department of Ecology, which is responsible for developing the guidance for jurisdictions when they do their periodic updates and when they're drafting their shoreline master programs, they updated their guidance in 2003, and it was really a kind of a big shift in how things were done. It was a shift towards a more science-based ecosystem management. There was a requirement for jurisdictions to do a shoreline inventory and characterization studies of their shorelines, so actually going out and inventorying the shorelines, looking at existing uses, areas where there was intact native vegetation, areas to preserve, areas where there was industry. So actually looking at the existing conditions on the ground and what the ecological conditions were. This allowed for better designation of each of the shoreline. So each of the areas along the city's shoreline now has a shoreline environment designation, and so that was based on the work that came out of the inventory and characterization. Also, the new requirements in the ecology guidance in 2003 required the city include policies to ensure no net loss of ecological functions that arise from development along the city's shorelines. So the images on the right are the reports that were done for that major update in 2010. The update actually wasn't required to be done until 2012, but the city was early and finished it in 2010, so that's why I've got 2010 and 2012 in the title there. But these reports are available on the website, and so it's just a lot of background information that supported that major update. One of the changes in the Department of Ecology guidance was how critical areas are treated within shoreline jurisdiction. So under the Growth Management Act, we know that the city is required to designate and protect critical areas and to protect their functions and values. And where critical areas occur within shoreline jurisdiction, they are regulated by the Shoreline Master Program alone and not the critical areas regulations that are required under the Growth Management Act. So before there was before the last periodic update, that was a major topic that needed to be addressed with that update, the confusion about which body of legislation applied within shoreline jurisdiction. Was it Growth Management Act or Growth Management Act or Shoreline Management Act? So that was resolved, and after those major periodic updates were completed, the critical areas within shoreline jurisdiction only are regulated by the Shoreline Master Program. I'm going to slow down and take a sip of water. Okay, so there are several options for how jurisdictions treat critical areas or how they incorporate them into the Shoreline Master Program. Some jurisdictions, or one option is to just embed the critical areas regulations directly into the body of the goals and policies and regulations of the Shoreline Master Program. The other way is to incorporate by reference your Growth Management Act, critical areas regulations, or the applicable provisions. You incorporate those by reference into the Shoreline Master Program. There are parts of the critical areas regulations that sometimes don't comply with SMA, so that's, you're including portions of the critical areas regulations, but not all of them. The way that the city incorporates critical areas regulations in its 2010 SMP is there's an appendix, Appendix A, at the end of the SMP that contains the critical areas regulations for shoreline areas. And that can be confusing for people for some reason. Okay, so this is our 2010 Shoreline Master Program that I've been talking about. It was adopted it was approved by Ecology and became effective in September of 2010. And this is just an outline of the different parts of the SMP, and I won't read through them. I'll spare you that. This is the official shoreline environment designation map that is within the SMP, and I was talking about those shoreline environment designations earlier along the different reaches of shoreline, and you can see the different colors here. I'll try to, I guess I can't zoom in. But each of the different colors represents a different shoreline environment designation. The orange is the Conservancy designation. Oh. I guess I do have a couple more animations. So I'll get into the shoreline environment designations here in just a minute, but this is a nice map that shows the entire city limits and all of the areas that are within shoreline jurisdiction and are regulated by the Shoreline Master Program and the Shoreline Management Act. So all the way along the marine shoreline, down along Fidalgo Bay, and there's a small portion over here on Padilla Bay that is also in shoreline jurisdiction. And then, of course, the Whistle Lake, Heart Lake, a little itty bitty teeny portion of Lake Erie down here on the very edge, and Little Cranberry Lake. And then we've got the Skyline area, Washington Park, the associated wetlands that we talked about. So the Ship Harbor wetlands are included in shoreline jurisdiction, as are the wetlands that are associated with Cranberry Lake, Little Cranberry. And I think that's it. Any questions on that map? Okay. So this next part of the presentation just goes through, I showed you the initial list of chapters within the SMP, so this is just going to hit on each of the chapters and what's included. So you have a nice overview of everything that's in this document. So Chapter 2 includes the scope, and it talks about the applicability of the Shoreline Master Program. And so the SMP applies to all uses and development within shoreline jurisdiction. Development is actually defined under the Shoreline Management Act, and it's a long definition. I put it down here at the bottom. But it includes a lot. It's basically any exterior alteration or construction of structures, grading, bulkheads, driving and piling. So lots of different activities on the shoreline are covered by the SMP. Chapter 3 of the SMP gets into the administrative provisions, so it talks about the different types of shoreline permits that may be required for development along the shoreline. There are 3 types of shoreline permits under the Shoreline Management Act. There is the Shoreline Substantial Development Permit, and those are required for all developments unless they are specifically exempt, and required for all developments that meet the legal definition of substantial development. So, as I mentioned, development is defined, and substantial development means any development which total cost or fair market value exceeds $8,500. Conditional use permits are not as common as a shoreline substantial development permit, but they still do happen from time to time. But shoreline conditional use permit is required if a particular use is listed as a conditional use in the shoreline environment designation, or if the SMP doesn't actually address that particular use. So if there's a situation where somebody proposes a use that the SMP just didn't anticipate, then it would be processed via a shoreline conditional use permit. Shoreline conditional use permits have criteria that the application needs to demonstrate that they meet, and those are established by the state law. And the Department of Ecology, after the local jurisdiction has finished its review and decision process, the permit gets sent to the Department of Ecology for their approval or their decision. And it's the same process for a shoreline variance permit. Variances are used to allow a project to deviate from the SMP's dimensional standards, so setbacks, height, those types of standards is a specific permit under the SMP, the SMP that has specific criteria that need to be demonstrated. And those permits also go to Department of Ecology after the local decision process is over. Oh yeah, so this says the proposals for development activities within shoreline jurisdiction may require one of these permits, or 2, or all of them, or none at all. So it really depends on the scope of the proposal and what the use is and the extent of the development. The other type of I'm not going to call it a permit because it's not a permit, but it is an authorization, is a letter of exemption from the requirement to get a shoreline substantial development permit. So exemptions are they are defined in the shoreline management rules. So there's a list of, I don't know, like 15 or 20 different types of projects that are exempt from having to go through the full shoreline permitting process. Some of the examples, at least that are common in Anacortes that we see a lot of, are like projects for normal maintenance or repair. You know, a dock gets damaged and somebody needs to go in and, you know, fix the piling or even replace an existing dock, like for like, in the same location, same size. That would be processed as an exemption. Another common exemption is a single-family residences and appurtenant structures. And another common one is, well, not that common, but sometimes we'll get requests for an exemption for site investigation. So people have to, for a marina redevelopment where they're doing, a new breakwater or work like that, they have to go in and test the sediment or for toxic materials or to figure out how deep they need to put the piles when they do the redevelopment. So even something like that requires review and authorization by the city. But an exemption, letter of exemption is not a big deal. It's, it doesn't go through the full, notice of application, public review process. It's an administrative decision and usually only takes a couple of weeks.
Mr. Dretsky? Quick question. I'm probably just not understanding the single-family residence. So if I want to build a single-family residence within the shoreline jurisdiction, I just need a housing permit? I don't need a shoreline permit? Is that what you're saying?
So you would need a letter of exemption from the requirement to get a shoreline permit. So that's correct. It's the letter of exemption and then a building permit for the residents are the permits that you would need.
And how would I get that letter of exemption?
You would apply, just like the application for a building permit is just an application form that gets submitted to the city.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So developments that are exempt from having to go through that full shoreline process are still have to comply with all of the applicable SMP policies and regulations. So it doesn't give you a break from any of those. It's just the procedural, the process aspect of the permitting that you are exempt from. So city staff is reviewing those exemptions for all the same things that we would for a shoreline substantial development permit. Okay. So moving on to chapter 4 of the SMP. So this chapter has goals and policies, just kind of like the comprehensive plan. These are different elements that are larger shoreline management issues, topics of shoreline management. So the shoreline use element, economic development, circulation, public access. So there are goals and policies in the SMP about all of those topics. And those goals and policies go to support and inform the more specific goals and policies and regulations that we'll talk about here in a minute. So chapter 5 talks about the shoreline environment designations and associated goals and policies. So the shoreline environment designations are intended to encourage development that will enhance the present or desired character of the shoreline. I wish I had an image that kind of shows so basically it's the shoreline divided up into different reaches, and the document that I told you about earlier, the inventory and characterization, each of the reaches is discussed in terms of its physical character and biological characteristics of the shoreline, and then that is what was used to develop the environment designations. This is that map again, and it includes all of the environment designations, and then I just put a description of the purpose of each of the designations from the SMP. So, for example, the conservancy designation, which you'll see along, this portion of Guaymas Channel, just north of Washington Park. There is a conservancy designation along the first 100 feet landward of ordinary high water mark. So it's kind of a parallel designation along Guaymas Channel. I'm sorry that it's so small and I can't zoom in, but that first stripe of orange there you see is the conservancy designation. And then the red is the shoreline residential designation. And then you'll see more conservancy designation along the Fidalgo Bay, some of the lakes, and the southwest side of Cap Stanley. The purpose of the conservancy designation is to protect and restore the public benefits and ecological functions of open space, natural areas, sensitive areas, while allowing compatible uses. And so these are areas that are, not built out. They still have some functioning, vegetation. They still are providing public benefit and ecological functions that can be maintained, and potentially some uses can be incorporated into those if they are compatible. The natural shoreline environment is the next one. That is, you'll see it like on the south side of Little Cranberry Lake, on the west side of Heart Lake, and around Washington Park. So that's like, the really, the areas that are relatively free of human influence or include intact or minimally degraded shoreline functions. So those are some of the best areas to, preserve and make sure that the policies and regulations aren't allowing, developments that's going to impact the functions and values. Shoreline residential designation is, you'll see along Skyline, along the little fingers, and then down south to the city limits. And then again, I mentioned it's also along Guaymas Channel, the second 100 feet from shoreline, from the ordinary high water mark. And then along over on Cap Stanley, there's some shoreline residential. So the purpose of that designation is to accommodate residential development and also protect and restore ecological functions. Some of the more developed areas of the city, or areas where the comprehensive plan and zoning envision, commercial and industrial uses, are designated urban, and that's the yellow color that you'll see along the Cap Stanley and Fidalgo Bay up here, and then also over in Skyline. This is formerly known as Loverix. Stabber Maritime, I think, is the owner now. And then urban maritime is reserved for the areas that are intended to preserve a variety of water-dependent, water-oriented, and water-related public, commercial, and industrial uses. So like uses that are associated with the Port of Anacortes. So you'll see that along the north shoreline here. And then down in the industrial zone on Fidalgo Bay. So those are our shoreline environment designations. So that's an important piece of information to know if you want to know what is allowed if you own property on the shoreline. Chapter 6 has the environmental protection general regulations. And I'm just going to cruise through those. So these are goals, policies, and regulations about shoreline impacts, mitigation, and bonding. Talks about vegetation conservation for projects that are occurring along shorelines. And then it also has the goals and policies related to critical areas that are within shoreline jurisdiction. Chapter 7 is our shoreline public access policies. And so in those policies, you'll see a requirement to provide public access for many types of shoreline development. It is a requirement to incorporate public access into the development unless there are, well, in certain circumstances, it's not required, like if it's a safety issue or things like that. But these policies require that consideration for larger developments. And it's got design standards for what that access needs to look like, easement requirements, and other design issues, public-private separation. And Chapter 8 is specific use policies and development regulations. So these are all of the different types of uses that you might propose within shoreline jurisdiction. So there are actually specific policies and regulations applicable to each. So depending on the type of use that's proposed, you go to that use and you'll find the specific policies and regulations. Same thing for shoreline modification policies. So modifications include the actual, physical changes to the shoreline. So boat launches, breakwaters, docks, fill, shoreline stabilization. Those all have their own policies and regulations as well. Chapter 10 is related to enforcement and penalties. Chapter 11 talks about the requirements for periodic review and update of the Shoreline Master Program. Chapter 12 has a bunch of definitions. There are definitions that are specific to the Shoreline Management Act, so it's important to, they might have one meaning under the zoning code, but the meaning is, or the definition is a little bit different under the Shoreline Master Program. Appendix A, again, is the Shoreline Critical Areas regulations that I mentioned earlier. And Appendix B is the Shoreline Restoration Plan. And this plan goes through and identifies goals and objectives for restoration of Anacortes' shorelines. It has an inventory of projects that were in the works or planned back when the SMP was updated by public agencies or environmental organizations. So it kind of identifies here's some high priority projects that could happen to improve ecological functions along the shoreline. Okay, so in this next, so that's the full Shoreline Master Program. Now you're experts. So this next little part, we'll see how it goes, but I was just gonna try to kind of walk through the steps that staff would go through, or that a person that, maybe wanted to find out about what's permitted on their property and shoreline, how would you go about finding that out? So this is kind of the overview of how you would start. First, you'd want to find out if the project is within shoreline jurisdiction, if the location is in shoreline jurisdiction, if the use that you're wanting to do or the modification is allowed in the shoreline environment designation that the property is in. From there, if it is allowed, you would determine what kind of permit is required. So does the activity require a shoreline substantial development permit, conditional use? Does it require variance, or is it exempt from the requirement to get a permit, a shoreline permit? From there, if, once you know what kind of permit you need, you can go through and identify what sections of the SMP apply based on your use and in shoreline environment designation and the scope of the development that's being proposed. The next steps, at least for planners that are reviewing a project, maybe not somebody that's just looking to find out what's allowed on their property, but the next steps would be to look at whether there are any environmental impacts or impacts to shoreline ecological resources that need to be mitigated. So has the project been designed to avoid impacts? Going through the mitigation sequencing of first looking at avoiding, minimizing impacts, or are the impacts unavoidable and they need to be mitigated? Do you have to provide mitigation for those impacts? And then for the shoreline permits, the substantial development and conditional use, a public notice and comment period would be required typically, or would be. And then the local decision is issued, filed with the Department of Ecology. If it's a shoreline conditional use or variance, then ecology makes the final decision. And then after all of that, if you get an approval, then an applicant can apply for a building permit to actually do the work. So they've gone through, cities ensured that the project, complies with the Shoreline Master Program and the Shoreline Management Act, and it's ready to be approved for construction. Oh, I just wanted to note also that the Shoreline Master Program and all of the regulations within it apply sort of as an overlay in addition to all of the applicable zoning and development regulations that apply to projects that aren't in shoreline jurisdiction. So all of those additional, design standards, setbacks, height, stormwater, those all still apply. It's just that the shoreline jurisdiction has these additional requirements that get overlaid. Okay, so in our example about the review steps that you would go through to determine what's allowed on a particular property and what the permit process would be. So the first question that we were going to ask ourselves is this project in shoreline jurisdiction? And to find out, the city does have an interactive map that includes these shoreline designations, and the distance here, the width of this line is about 200 feet. We don't know exactly where the ordinary high water mark is. That's something that gets defined in the field based on vegetation, and usually a biologist would do that. But this gives you kind of a good idea of where shoreline jurisdiction ends. So with this interactive map, you can find out if your property is in shoreline jurisdiction and then also what the environment designation is. So in this fictional example, we're going to pretend like we're looking at a property in Skyline with a shoreline residential designation. And we want to build a house, single family. So the next step is to figure out if that proposed use or modification is allowed in the shoreline environment designation of the property. So we know that so this is now going into the Shoreline Master Program. This is the table that outlines all of the different shoreline environment designations along the top, and then along the left-hand side are categories of uses. So very much like our zoning code and the permitted uses along the left-hand side and the zones along the top. So we know that the property is zoned shoreline, it's designated shoreline residential. So we were looking in this column, and we know that we want to do a residential development of a single-family home. So we come over, and there's a P here, which means it's permitted. So a single-family home is a permitted use in the shoreline residential environment designation. So now that we figured that out, we need to figure out what type of permit is required, what type of shoreline permit is required for that, for that development type. And so for a single-family residence, we know that there is a specific exemption outlined in the WAC for construction on shorelands by an owner, lessee, or contract purchaser of a single-family residence for their own use. So no spec homes. And so based on this exemption from the state rules, we know that that is the type of shoreline authorization that is required. So we don't have to do a shoreline permit. We don't need a conditional use permit or variance. It's just a letter of exemption. So at that point, if you're the applicant, you would get on the city's website and look at, what do I need to submit with my application for a shoreline exemption to build a single-family home. And so we have submittal checklists that you can look at, and it identifies everything that would need to be submitted. So once that, and you'll also want to take a look at what the specific environment designation policies and regulations are, and also the specific use requirements. So I just kind of listed out the different sections of the SMP that would apply in this particular case for a new single-family home in the shoreline residential SCD. So shoreline residential regulations in section 5.9 talk about the required setbacks. So I know in that particular area in Skyline, because it's already developed with single-family homes that are relatively close to the ordinary high water mark already, the setback requirement there is 25 feet. So that's the smallest setback we have for non-water dependent use. And I think that might be the smallest one for residential development. But that's, recognizing the existing development pattern out there. That section also talks about impervious surface limits. So depending on the slope of the lot, there's a maximum, ranges from like 20 to 30% maximum impervious surface. And then there are also requirements for either retaining existing riparian vegetation if there is any. I know that particular area, it's not super likely that there's a lot. But if there is native riparian vegetation, that would need to be shown on the site plan that gets submitted, and it would need to be retained during construction. And if there is no native riparian vegetation, then a planting plan that adds new vegetation would be required. So that's the environment designation. There's also other sections that are applicable, the vegetation conservation section, and that's above and beyond just the one that's specific to shoreline residential. That has requirements for vegetation retention and replacement, and regulations for trimming. On some properties, folks want to be able to continue maintaining a view. So there are regulations for how, what's required there, what's allowed. And then there's also, for residential development, generally we need to be looking at is even, meeting the requirements for setbacks. We need to make sure that the new structure is going to be located to avoid the need for future structural shore defense, if there were none. In shoreline, or in Skyline, we know there's, the existing rockery along most of that shoreline. But those are all considerations that staff would be looking at as part of a review. And then the bottom line with all of these decisions that the city is issuing for either for a shoreline exemption or any of the other types of permits is, that we need to be ensuring that there is no net loss of ecological functions necessary to sustain shoreline resources. So that's, something that we're trying to look at or that we are looking at for every single permit, looking at what the impacts are. Can they be avoided? What's the mitigation? Are we maintaining that baseline? Okay, so this moves on to the next step in the process where, we've looked at all of the application materials and, we've determined that, yes, we can approve this exemption, but we need to add some conditions to make sure that the new development will comply with SMP. So you might have some conditions about completing the shoreline planting before final occupancy of the home. There might be a requirement for maintenance and monitoring plan to make sure that the vegetation that is planted actually survives. And then also there might be a requirement for recording a notice on title that identifies, this area on the lot or the shoreline vegetation needs to be retained so that future owners know that, they can't go in and mow it down. And then the rest of these steps aren't really applicable to a shoreline exemption because there is no public notice or comment with that type of authorization. The decision that would be issued is the exemption letter, and then the applicant could apply for a building permit. And we don't file those with ecology typically. All right. Thanks for bearing with me on that. The next little section that we have, and we're almost done, is to give you an update on, so I just kind of walked through all of the aspects of our current existing adopted 2010 Shoreline Master Program. We are required to update our Shoreline Master Program every 10 years. For the last periodic update that was due, the city began the update process in 2019. And the city was also, at the same time, updating the critical areas requirements that were required under GMA with the intent of incorporating those updated regulations into the Shoreline Master Program. We got pretty far in the process. Commissioner Martin, I think you might be the only one that, or no, I think you might be the only one that was around for that process.
I think so.
I think Mr. Dretzky was.
Yeah, okay.
2 out of 5.
Yeah, that's pretty good, actually. 2 out of 4 tonight, so.
And Mr. Ryan's attending.
Oh, Mr. Ryan, sorry. Yep, 2 out of 5.
We think he's attending.
So anyways, the process got pretty far. There were public, open houses, meetings, drafts, environmental review. A draft was sent to the Department of Ecology to get their initial determination of consistency, which was provided. And the Planning Commission recommended approval of the updates to the City Council. City Council in, let's see, I guess it was in 2022, wanted to see the condition or the recommended changes that Planning Commission had provided them. They wanted to see those integrated into the document along with some other changes and then gone out for another round of public review. And so we did that. There was another public comment period in October of 2022, I think. And during all of that, there were also appeals of the city's critical areas regulations ongoing. And so we got to a point where, you know, the plan to integrate the critical area regulations into the SMP, there was a question about whether, you know, that was going to be possible because of the ongoing appeals and uncertainty of what the final regulations would look like. So the appeals were finally resolved in the end of 2023, I want to say. But by then, we were on to the comprehensive plan update for 2025. So that's just a little bit of history of where that process was, where it got left off. And, you know, now we are wanting to reintroduce that process and get back started. So just a brief reminder of what that periodic update was focused on. It was not like a major comprehensive update like the previous update in 2010. It was primarily focused on looking at what the updates to the Shoreline Management Act and other state laws were since the 2010 adoption of the SMP and incorporating any needed amendments based on those. It was also looking at consistency with the Anacortes comp plan. There were some changes to, there were some inconsistencies between the future land use designation of some of the properties and the shoreline environment designations. So there were maybe like 4 different locations where that was proposed to be changed for consistency. Looking at consistency with other city regulations and making those updates. And then organizationally, right now we have a standalone SMP. The proposal with the last update was to codify the regulations out of the Shoreline Master Program and put those into the development regulations. So all development regulations for zoning, for everything, for shoreline would all be in one location. And then migrating the shoreline goals and policies into the comp plan as a shoreline element of the comprehensive plan. So they're the standalone SMP would go away, and the policies would go with the comp plan where the policies are, and the regulations would go with the development regulations. So that was the plan. And yeah, I mean, I think those are the main updates that were the subject of that update. So, this is just a timeline of what had been completed during that process.
Excuse me, can you go back that one slide?
Yep.
In 2023, were those things implemented then, when the appeals were resolved?
No.
All the proposed changes?
The periodic update was delayed. Completing the periodic update was delayed, and we are looking to reinitiate that process.
Okay.
The Planning Commission. Okay, that's all I have. Are there any other questions? Thank you so much for bearing with me through that.
Well, I guess I will continue along that vein. Is a lot of the work that was done have to be redone, or is a lot of it, is that sort of set the foundation for going forward a couple years later?
We're still evaluating exactly what the next steps need to be. We wanted to, bring this to the Planning Commission and provide this refresher on what the SMP is, and talk about moving forward what the requirements are. But I think as far as what process and what the content of the update will be after today. That's not been, we don't have the specifics on that
Okay.
yet.
As the state has modified what they want done, have we changed, have we modified that plan put in place in 2010 to keep up with the mandated requirements by the state?
The state is working on, they continue to work on updates to their guidelines and to their rules. There's some in draft form right now. I don't, the draft where we left off with the periodic update addressed all of the changes that had happened to the state law between 2010 and 2019. When we started that process, we would want to take a look at what's changed since 2019 and see if that needs to be integrated into the update moving forward, but
the
that's
city-
not been done yet.
The city was forced in that, all the changes done in that 9-year period, became requirements for the permit process or application process.
I'm sorry, I missed the
Well,
first part of that.
The state made changes between 2010 and 2019. I'm sure they had a steady diet of
Yeah.
changes coming down the pike. And those then were always incorporated into the city's plan for how you got a permit and everything.
All the changes to state law were incorporated into the proposed amendments
As you
for
got
the
'em, okay.
SMP. Yeah, they haven't been adopted yet because we haven't adopted the
Okay.
update.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chairman Teske, just for clarification, can you go back, I think, one slide? This slide, so it says what's included, and can you clarify, is this, for the shoreline master plan, for this update, you said you're removing the regulations, the shoreline regulations into the, is that into the city regulations?
Yeah, into the development regulations in
Okay.
Title 19
Okay.
of the municipal code.
And then the
That was
shoreline goals and policies to the comprehensive plan. So essentially, is there going to be any SMP after this review, or is it all going to be found in other documents and
There,
OBE?
with this plan, there would not be a standalone SMP document. It would be integrated into other documents. So that is something to consider. It is consistent with, ecology's guidance on acceptable ways to do things. So
Okay.
it's,
When you say ecology, are you talking about the state
yes,
ecology?
the
DOE?
State Department of Ecology, I'm sorry. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Dretsky?
Yes, Dr. Martin.
So, so if the shoreline plan is going to become an element in the comprehensive plan, and we've looked previously at the comprehensive plan before it was the new comprehensive plan, it seems like we have to go back that far to the comp plan itself. That seems like what we need to do, but you're evaluating.
We are evaluating, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll want to make sure that, everything is consistent and not in conflict. So
Right,
that'll be part of what we're looking at.
thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Mills.
I think my question is similar to all three of them. When it comes to recommending changes, what is the baseline that we're recommending changes to? Is it the 2010 document, or is it the draft document from 2019?
I think we're still evaluating what the best path forward is.
Okay.
Yeah,
It is the same question.
Okay.
it's a good question.
Is there a deadline for when this all has to be done, like there was on the comp plan?
Well, we had been planning to complete it this year after the completion of the comprehensive plan update, the periodic update of the comp plan. So that is the goal.
Is it safe to assume that whatever led to all the appeals and basically the difference of opinion about what should be done, that those won't pop up after you do a lot more work again? I mean, those have been satisfied, and those people and whoever brought those issues up is in accepting the fact that we're going to be doing it now. And again, I guess my fear is that the city does a lot of work, and then all of a sudden there's appeals again. So it's a long, hard process for you guys, and get to a date where all of a sudden the appeals start popping up.
Yeah, I don't think I have a comment on that.
Okay.
I don't think that it's, it's hard to say.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you very much for bringing us up to date and telling us how we got to where we are now. It'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.
Planning Department update.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. I'm John Coleman, Director of Planning, Community, and Economic Development. And last month, I think I buried you in Planning Commission updates. So I don't think there's really much to report since then. None of your, aside from trying to think if it's been since then, that I think it was just around that time that the last of your proposed or last of the projects that you reviewed had already gone to council and been pushed along. So there's nothing that the Planning Commission has touched has moved to the City Council, and we're kind of done with those until your next recommendations from these sort of legislative actions that we'll be doing. We do anticipate that we'll be working hard on this Shoreline Master Program update, as well as probably bringing some other smaller, easy code fixes that are unrelated to this, that just things that we've been wanting to get to, but the comprehensive plan prevented us from doing so for many reasons. One, we were busy with the comp plan, and two, we didn't want to change code in the middle of our large development regulation updates. So we tried to stick to just the comp plan related ones. So that's about all. Do you have any questions for staff?
Mr. Tredsky,
Dr. Martin.
do we have an update on any new planning commissioners coming on board?
The mayor's communicating with people, trying to find someone to fill the last position. So it's really up to the mayor. I don't know exactly yet, but we're moving quickly.
We have applicants, though?
Yeah, we're moving. I think the mayor's getting ready to do some appointments.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else for the good of the order?
I think we just had mentioned that, as we're working hard on the SMP, we might be inclined to have 2 meetings a month, and so include a special meeting. We wanted to see how today went to feel it out, and so we don't know yet in April. It's possible we'll have 2 in April, but this will be it for March, right? Yeah, we weren't planning a second one in March, but there might be 2 in April.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the staff? Any other questions? Thank you. With that, I guess we'll adjourn the meeting, unless anybody has any objections. No objections. So we'll adjourn at 7:15. Thank you all.